Hello. Thank you for tuning in to this 2024 General Election Candidate Forum for the Legislative District 22 House of Representatives, Positions 1 and 2. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County in collaboration with Thurston Community Media. The League of Women Voters is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public to defend our democracy and empower voters. Our membership is open to all voters in Thurston County. If you're interested in knowing more about joining the Thurston League, we encourage you to check out our website at www.lwvthurston.org. I'm Janet Heyer with the League, and I will be moderating this forum. Wendy Havenstreit will be our timer. Each district elects 2 representatives to Washington State's legislative branch. The legislature has 2 chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The legislature determines the level and means by which citizens will be taxed, writes and modifies state law, regulates other branches of state government, and helps Washingtonians understand and work with state government. The 3 candidates participating in this forum today are Beth Doglio, Steve Owens, and Lisa Parshley. Syd Locke, running for position 2, was invited but was unable to join us today. For this forum, each candidate will have an opportunity to answer a series of questions. We will call on candidates by alphabetical order, and they will take turns being the first one to answer the questions. Each question will relate to only one subject, and candidates should answer the questions posed. Candidates will also give a 1-minute closing statement. Candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to each question. If you need me to repeat the question, don't hesitate to ask. The timer will turn yellow when you have 15 seconds left, and then will show a stop sign when your time is up. If you don't notice the sign, I will tell you. We stress the importance of civility in our forums. You each have received the ground rules for the forum and have agreed to abide by them. Beginning with Beth Doglio, the first question is, what do you think is the most pressing statewide issue the legislature faces this upcoming session, and how would you address it?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with voters about the issues of importance in the legislature. That's a great question. It's challenging to answer because I feel like there's so many pressing issues, but I would say housing ranks right up there. We still have so many people that are unhoused, that are facing chemical dependency issues, that need mental health. And that's why I'm the chair, the board chair of New Horizons, formerly Quixote. It's giving me a really good sense of what's happening on the ground as we're trying to create housing options and wraparound services for our most vulnerable neighbors. I am committed to working with Representative Bateman, likely to be Senator Bateman, on supply side issues. We clearly need to increase the supply of housing, and I will continue to work on making sure that our most vulnerable neighbors, those most low income in our communities, have options to get into housing.
Thank you. Steve Owens?
I think that the most pressing issue that we face in the state House and the state legislature today is a 2-party system that's disconnected from the people. And I am doing everything I can to try to address that by running as an independent and setting an example for others. Beyond that, I think that some of the things that are on the agenda are housing. I think that we need to rethink the way we set our rules for construction and zoning so that people can afford to build houses that are affordable. I think that we need to work harder to promote collectively owned real estate as opposed to for-profit real estate. And in general, I think we need to end this marriage that we have between the state legislature and the construction industry.
Thank you. And Lisa Parshley.
Well, I have to agree with Representative Doglio. Housing is huge, and there are so many crises at this point. And yeah, I use the term crisis intentionally. We have people that are struggling to pay for housing, food, childcare. But to be honest, I think one of the things that I think we should also be looking seriously at is the revenue streams for our state budget. We have a system that needs to pay for so many things. We have schools that are struggling, we have local governments that are struggling. And to be honest, local governments are also in the front line of dealing with homelessness, the housing issues, climate. We're trying to figure out how to make sustainable economies while not providing regressive taxation. So I personally feel like we also need to start digging deeply into how do we provide the revenue for our state budget, because we have to start addressing all of these issues. And one of the first ways is to find a sustainable revenue stream that doesn't harm the people that pay the most and make the least.
Thank you. Beginning with Steve Owens, the next question is, what, if any, changes to our election laws do you think would address concerns about the security of the process?
I think if we move to ranked choice voting, that would be very huge, as opposed to a two-party kind of winner-take-all system. I find that most people don't feel represented, even if they vote for somebody. Usually they're voting against somebody, not for somebody. So the only choice we have is who's going to not represent you in the House this time, as opposed to who's going to represent you. I think that we should end the caucus system within the House and the Senate. I don't think there's anything in the state constitution that says we need to have a caucus. And so independent people should not be asked to join a caucus. It should be individual representatives whose mandate is exclusively the people who elected them.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes,
sorry.
I can. Let's see. What, if any, changes to our election laws do you think would address concerns about the security of the process?
Well, I will just very quickly tell you that I was honored to be invited into the Thurston County election process. The building, I got a tour from Mary Hall, and I will tell you right now, my comfort level of Washington State's election security is extremely high. The process they have put in place from the moment the ballots arrive in that building to the moment those ballots are counted is exceedingly high. They have observers, they have multiple people checking signatures, they're checking the ballots if there's any question on how it's marked, and it's actually being monitored by our Homeland Security to make sure there's no outside influences. If you were to ask me about election security in Washington, I'd actually say we're pretty close to dead on, and if anything, the country should be adopting Washington State's election processes. And we have to thank our local Mary Hall, because she's put into place most of these initiatives that protect our votes.
Thank you. And Beth Doglio.
Great, thank you, Janet. Well, I want to take it was a little off the topic, but I do agree with ranked choice voting, so that's a nice place where we have some common ground here as opponents. But in terms of secure, again, I agree with Lisa. I think we have one of the most secure systems in the country, and you know, watching other states sort of struggling with absentee ballot and mail-in ballots when we have a very secure system here in Washington State that's been working. If you look at the Dave Upthegrove race with that hand count, it changed by all of 2 votes. And, you know, so we have not just the secure situation of the actual votes being cast and secured, but then we have a whole recount system that also makes sure that people feel like their votes are counted and counted securely. So I feel like we're doing great. I think Senator Hunt did a tremendous job making voting easier. You can register till day of now. And so those are also things that I think just make voting easier for people to do, which is important since we're all so busy.
Thank you. This time beginning with Lisa Parshley, the third question. What is your opinion on the concept of legislative privilege when it comes to shielding legislators' communications and other documents from public view?
Well, you're asking a city council member this, and I have worked under the Open Public Meeting Act for over 6 years. And I think there are some excellent aspects of that. It makes sure that our community knows the transparency, but it also does slow down the process of policy making because we can't have the opportunity to have open conversations about differences in our opinion so that we can come to a common ground. It makes it a little more difficult to do that. So should there be more constraint on the legislatures? Potentially yes, but we should be able to preserve the ability of folks to be able to have those open conversations. My person sitting next to me, Steve Owens, has brought up the problem between the two parties. We want the Democrat and the Republican to feel open in their ability to have a conversation without their parties giving them a hard time. So there needs to be maybe potentially some more openness, but we need to preserve that.
Thank you. And to Beth Doglio.
Yes, thank you, Janet. So in terms of legislative privilege, it is not my intent to ever utilize that privilege, which the courts have at this point agreed is something that is constitutional. But it is not my intent to do that. I've not used it to date in any way, and hope that continues into the future. So I think that is my position, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And Steve Owens.
If you're representing the people, you need to make sure that you're accountable to them. And you cannot be accountable to them if you are conducting meetings and doing horse trading behind closed doors. And so even if it slows down the legislative process, I think it's important that openness and transparency be maintained at all times in legislative communication.
Thank you. Returning to Beth Doglio, the next question is, according to the Washington Secretary of State, only 41% of voters returned their ballot for this year's primary. What ideas do you have to increase voter turnout?
Well, I think we have passed a tremendous amount of legislation to make it as easy as possible in this state to vote. You can return your ballot in the mail, and the state picks up the cost of that. You can register until the end of the voting period. And so I feel like we've done lots and lots of things to make it as easy as possible, and now it's really up to organizations like the League of Women Voters and other civically minded folks and legislators and individuals to just really encourage people and make them know how important their vote is. We just saw a vote that in this state, a statewide campaign that was decided by 49 votes. Every single one of those votes counted in that race. The first race that I worked on was a congressional race that was won by 4 votes in 1986. I think making sure that people know how important their vote is and helping them get it in is the most important thing that we as elected officials can do.
Thank you. Steve Owens.
When you're not in control of the menu, then your vote doesn't count for nearly as much as it should. So if you can swing an election by 10 or 20 votes, sure. But at the end of the day, if you still have that two-party system rather than ranked choice voting, if you still have that two-party system, you're not in control of who is on that ballot. Not really. In Washington, we do a really good job of having these open primaries. And I think we do a remarkable job there, and I want to protect that. But in general, I believe that the real problem that we have with our political system today is this whole concept of voting red or blue. And I think that when you do that, it allows you to check out mentally, and it allows you to just pick a side and go for it, and then rationalize that afterwards. And that's not really involvement. That's not active participation in democracy.
Thank you. Lisa Parshley.
This is a good question because having been through 2 elections and seeing the voter turnout in primaries be below 40%, how do you engage people? One, I didn't say this before, but I'm 100% for the ranked choice. I'm for the open primaries. People get to see their votes count. But I also, think we should, besides working with organizations such as yours, we should start looking at even asking the school system to start teaching civics engagement in the high school years, teaching them the value of their vote so that when they understand that we have a race that is decided by 41 to 53 initially vote differences, that their vote counts. I heard in Michigan that President Biden won by 11,000 votes, which is 2 votes per precinct in Michigan. We should be teaching kids before they ever have a chance to do that, as well as exploring new options and working with organizations.
Thank you. Beginning with Steve Owens, the fifth question is, September is Suicide Prevention Month, and the Washington State Department of Health reports the majority of young people who commit suicide use firearms. What would you do to prevent youth access to firearms?
We already have laws in place that do everything they can to prevent youth access to firearms. Besides disarming the entire working class, I'm not 100% sure that you can solve that problem, and I'm not sure that that's the right problem to be solving. I think the right problem to be solving is why do so many youths want to kill themselves? I grew up in a different state, in a different time. Kids drove to school with guns in the back of their truck, visibly displayed and parked in the school parking lot, and nobody shot themselves or anyone else, all right? This is a mental health crisis. This is not an access to firearms crisis, because people will kill themselves if they're intent on killing themselves, regardless of whether there are firearms. Maybe a little bit less, but that's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Thank you. Lisa Parshley.
I agree. It is a two-part process. It's a behavioral health problem. We have a serious problem in high schools and even grade schools, as I've heard recently. Children are stressed. They're stressed about the environment. They're looking at not being able to get working jobs that pay their bills and actually give them something to live with. So there's a lot of fear and stress in the school system and children. We need to address that seriously. But I do think it's also access. I think we should be exploring the idea of what are the ability of a parent that has guns and buying guns and then handing them over to kids, like the last few school shootings that occurred. I also know from my background in medicine that if you have easy access to a way to commit suicide, you're more likely to do it. So we do need to face both of those, access to the kids, to the guns, and our behavioral health.
Thank you. Beth Doglio.
Well, 100% believe that we need to be implementing more mental health and funding that at the state level, particularly in our school system. Kids today have a different environment in which they are building their brains, and it is around social media. And they have so much access to so many different kinds of imagery, and I just feel like it's really hard to kind of work through that for many kids. There's just so much social anxiety. I see it in the kids around me. My kids are 20 and 25, and I see how much anxiety social media brings to them and how that could lead to an increase in suicide. In terms of guns, one very clear thing we need to do in the legislature this session is make sure that guns that are in cars are required to be locked up and safe. That is a big focal point right now for the legislature. There's a lot of stolen guns out of cars, and we need to fix that problem and make sure that kids don't have access to those guns.
Thank you. In the remaining time, I'm going to ask the candidates about the 4 initiatives that will be on the November 5th ballot. I will read how each measure will be worded on the ballot, and each candidate will say whether they support or oppose each initiative. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes to explain their views about the 4 initiatives. Measure number 2124 concerns state long-term care insurance. This measure would provide that employees and self-employed people must elect to keep coverage under RCW 50B.04 and could opt out any time. It would also repeal a law governing an exemption for employees. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? Starting with Lisa Parshley.
No.
And back to Beth.
No.
And Steve.
Yes.
Okay. Initiative number 2117 concerns carbon tax credit trading. This measure would prohibit state agencies from imposing any type of carbon tax credit trading and repeal legislation establishing a cap and invest program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? Starting with Beth Doglio.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Thank you. Initiative 2109 concerns taxes. This measure would repeal an excise tax imposed on the sale or exchange of certain long-term capital assets by individuals who have annual capital gains of over $250,000. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? Starting with Steve Owens.
No.
Lisa?
No.
And Beth. Thank you. Measure number 2066, regulating energy services, including natural gas and electrification. This measure would repeal or prohibit certain laws and regulations that discourage natural gas use and/or promote electrification, and require certain utilities and local governments to provide natural gas to eligible customers. Should this measure be enacted into law, yes or no? Starting with Lisa Parshley.
No.
No.
Yes.
Thank you. Starting with Beth Doglio, each candidate will now have 2 minutes to explain their views on all 4 initiatives.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I'm a no, 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 as we just established. 2117 would harm our clean air programs, our clean water programs, protections for forests and farms, particularly wildfires, and it would devastate our transportation system. It is definitely something that this state, we want to continue going forward to make sure we're protecting our air, our water, our farms, our forests, and our transportation system. So I am a definite no on that. On 2124, this dismantles our Washington's long-term care program. Long-term care, it provides people at the end of their life a small amount of money that helps them get care into their homes. Maybe they want to stay in their homes at the end of their lives. This is important, and that long-term care falls disproportionately on women. So repealing this and dismantling that program will have a disproportionate impact on women. 2109 devastates funding for schools as well as early childhood learning. That's where those funds are going, and it basically impacts about 4,000 people in the state of Washington, and it is on income from stocks and bonds after the $250,000 income that people have. That helps to right our system, our tax system, which is pretty upside down. Now that we have the capital gains tax in place, we are, instead of being 50 in terms of an upside down system, we are now 49. So let's keep that in place and vote no on 2109. Finally, 2066 attacks energy efficiency by repealing common sense protections in that bill. It's going to save us all money on our utility bills, and it also would be making our communities more vulnerable during storms, wildfires, and deadly heat waves. No on that one as well.
Thank you. Steve Owens.
So regarding the capital gains tax, I think that in general the capital gains tax strategy is a good strategy. It's more progressive. I do, however, not like the way that it's earmarked. I don't believe that we should be earmarking it for construction companies. I think that money should be more earmarked towards teachers and teacher salaries, which it's not. With regard to the carbon trading scheme, I just don't support the idea of creating yet another stock market for profiteers to circumvent the responsibility of actually doing things that make the environment better. I would much rather us directly attack carbon consumption in sensible ways. For example, reducing unnecessary commutes on our highways and allowing more, promoting more work from home than what we have today. With regard to the long-term care plan, the younger you are, the less likely you are to see a dime of the money you're being taxed. And I don't think it's fair to young people. I don't even think it's fair to me, because I may or may not see a dime of that. I would have to stay in Washington to benefit from that, which means I'm not free to move around the country. And so I don't think it's fair. This is not a good tax.
Thank you. Lisa Parshley.
Well, I'll start with the capital gains. I'm absolutely against this initiative. We have been working hard to right-size some of our funding for our schools. And honestly, the impact on the average person in Washington is going to be minimal. It's those that are making the most that will be impacted. And it is providing necessary early learning funding for the schools. And I know quite a few of the Olympia School Board members, and they're absolutely against this as well. As far as the 2117 goes, 100% against this. This is already starting to show an impact on jobs and green economy. It's also potentially in the future going to be providing, even for our local region, for shovel-ready jobs, funding that's going to allow us to do this while protecting the air quality, water quality, and reducing fire risks. As far as long-term care, absolutely, we should be turning that one down, because you never know when you're going to need it. And we've just recently learned that about 1 in 8 people in the end of their life will be looking at caring for an elder in their family. And we want to keep them in their home. It's the most economic way to do that. And having this money, being able to keep someone at the end of their life in their home before long-term care, this money will bridge that gap. It will help that family be able to lose that potential income. And as Beth indicated, most of the time that is to the women in the family. The last one, the new one on the gas, 2066, I believe. I've worked for 6 years as a city council member on bringing our community and the region into climate mitigation possibilities to achieve our goals. This will reverse all of the work that a lot of cities and counties in the state of Washington have been working towards. I'm absolutely 100% against it.
Thank you, Lisa. Each candidate will now have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement, starting with Steve Owens.
So it sounds to me like there are a lot of citizen-backed initiatives on the agenda that have a lot of legislators really upset. And it really calls to question, did they make the right choices from the get-go? Did they engage the people? Because at the end of the day, if any of these passes, it will be because 51% of the voting public exercises their democratic power to make it happen. And if these are bad initiatives, then the voters will turn them down. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Lisa Parshley.
Well, in case you didn't know, my name is Lisa Parshley. I'm running for Legislative District 22 Representative, Position 2. I'm doing this because I was taught that you have to give back to your community. I was taught that if your community is going to be a caring, compassionate community, you have to roll your sleeves up and do this. 2017, I ran for city council. I've been serving on city council through 5 declared emergencies: homelessness, housing, climate, opioid crisis, racism as a health crisis, and we've lived through a pandemic. If anything, I am more committed to give back to our community, taking all the lessons I've learned at city council to the legislature, and seeing if I can't bring to the cities and the counties in the state some help from the cities, from the state government, and allowing them to be able to do their work. I'm also wanting to represent Washington because I'm very proud of Washington. So on November 5th, Lisa Parshley, Legislative District 22, Position 2.
Beth, Lisa, and Steve.
Oh, I didn't give my
I wanted
closing
that.
statement.
Beth, we're back to you.
Great. Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters. My mom was the president of the League, and I really appreciate how committed to upholding democracy the League is, and providing this opportunity for us to talk directly to voters. I've been honored to serve as the legislator of the 22nd Legislative District for 6 years, and I am looking forward to the possibility of serving another 2 years, and would appreciate your vote on November 5th. I will continue to work to make Washington State one of the best employers, the best employer, by working with our state employees to make sure that Washington Place is just a great place to work. I love working with our state employees, and as you know, we have a very high percentage of that in our district. I will continue to work to increase education funding, to represent the LGBTQ+ members of our community with honesty and openness and fairness, and I will be continuing to work on gun responsibility measures as we discussed, and again, I would appreciate your vote in November.
Now, I can thank you all so much for participating in this forum. We thank our partner, TCMedia, for producing and airing it. We're indebted to TCMedia for years of making these forums happen and educating the voters. We encourage our viewers to be a voter in the upcoming election on November 5th. Ballots for military personnel were mailed on September 20th, and all other ballots will be mailed on October 10th. You may register to vote up to Election Day in Washington. Every vote counts. Thank you for watching this 2024 General Election Candidate Forum.